Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I thought I would talk about a topic, and that is, should designers be paid? Now, the reason why I decided to talk about this topic, it's been on my list of videos to record for a while, and it was after some stuff that was brought up during the Game of Wool, which was obviously on Channel 4 here in the UK in November and December. And there was some controversy about some of the designs that were published as a result of the competition or the TV programme, and whether designers were compensated for their work or not. So I thought I'd talk about, in general, do designers deserve to be paid for their work, or is it okay to work for exposure? So I thought I would talk about that in today's video, so I hope you enjoy it. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns. I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website, YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. I'm not sure when this video is coming out. It might be coming out while I'm away in Norway, in which case my website will be closed. It may not come back until after I come back from Norway, I'm not sure, but if my website is open, you can go there and order. If you go on my website and you can't add anything to your cart, then it's because I'm away and you can't order anything. But normally there's a message on my website as well that states that. So I thought I would talk about the sometimes controversial topic: do designers deserve to be paid? Is it okay to work for exposure? I have been designing knitting patterns now and occasional crochet patterns for 20 years. 20 years, gosh, it's a long time, isn't it? A lot of stuff has changed in that time, but some things haven't changed in that time. So I remember when I first started designing, there was a lot of controversy about whether it was okay to work for exposure. And it's really difficult when you're a new designer, because it is tempting to say, yes, I will work for exposure, because you may not have much of a following and nobody knows your work, and you've got to be seen somehow. So I do think there are times when it's okay to work for exposure, but also designers deserve to be paid for their work, because it's a lot of work. And let's face it, none of us can live on exposure. None of us can pay our bills with exposure alone. The very first pattern I had published by a publication was by an online publication. It's not around anymore. It disappeared many years ago. 15, 20 years ago, maybe that long ago, I can't remember. But I designed a pair of socks, and I don't think I was ever paid for that. I was supposed to be paid, but I'm not 100% sure that I ever got paid. I seem to remember I didn't get paid, but because I didn't have any experience, and I was just thrilled that somebody wanted to publish my pattern. I also don't think I ever chased it up and demanded to be paid, which I would do now. The person who was the editor of that online publication decided to go ahead and create a print magazine. And if you were around 20 years ago, you may know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name any names because it's a blast from the past, and I won't name any names, but if you were around then you might know who I'm talking about. But she went on to create a print publication, and she asked me if she could publish one of my patterns in the print publication, because after I had the sock pattern published, I submitted, I think, a couple of shawl patterns, and she said, can I use that for my print publication? So I said yes, and obviously I did get paid. This publication went on, I think it changed names 2 or 3 times. I think it was under 3 different names in the end as the years went on. I designed a lot for them, but it got to a point where I was struggling to get paid. So I made sure I got paid for the work I'd already done for them and the work I've been contracted to do, and then I stopped submitting anything, because at that point, I got to the point where I thought, I do not want to do work unless I'm being paid for it. But that very first pattern that they published in their online publication, I don't ever remember getting paid for it. It wasn't very much anyway, and it was before I started doing this as a job, really, and I wasn't that bothered about it. But I wanted to get paid for it, but I also wasn't that bothered. But also that led to me being published in other publications, and once you get published in a publication, it's then easier to reach out to other publications to say, I've been published, can I submit some designs to your magazines. So exposure definitely does help get you more work. In the 20 years I've been designing, I've been self-publishing, I've been designing for magazines, both here and in the UK, and in Germany, I think. There was a design I did for Artisano, I think it was, that was published in a German magazine. Can't remember what that was called. And I think some of my patterns in The Knitter have also been translated. Does The Knitter, do they have a German version? Sure, there are some other patterns as well that have been published in other countries. But I've designed for loads of British magazines. Some of them have come and gone. Some of them are still here. I've designed for several American magazines. I've contributed to books both here and in the US. I've designed for quite a few different yarn companies and a couple of yarn shops. So I've done quite a variety of work, really. I'm struggling a bit with the light in here because it's quite bright outside, but it keeps going sunny, in which case it gets too bright in here. And then if I close the curtain and the sun goes away, it gets too dark. So apologies about the lighting situation in here. So I have designed for loads of different publications. And what I will say is that designing for yarn companies and publications is not very well paid. With magazines and sometimes books, they will usually have the exclusive rights to publish that pattern for a certain period. I think most of the contracts I've signed have been like 6 months to 2 years. For yarn companies, whether I've signed a contract or not, and I've done a lot of work for yarn companies and for magazines where I've never signed a contract, I just assume for yarn companies they will want to keep the rights to that design for as long as they are in existence. I have done some work from yarn companies that are no longer around, so those rights I've assumed have reverted to me. But the problem is as well that republishing a design that you have published for another publication is quite difficult because you quite often can't use their photos. So you have to take new photos, you have to rewrite the pattern in your style. So each publication will have their own style sheet that you have to follow, which is different from the way I write my self-published patterns. So if I had a shawl published in, say, The Knitter or Knitting magazine, I would then need to do my own photos because I can't use theirs in my pattern, and I would need to rewrite that pattern to fit my style sheet, which is different from theirs, which means I also would have to pay for tech editing just to make sure that when I rewrite it, I don't introduce errors. And if it's a sweater, then I would make sure I can get someone to model it, and as most magazine designs are done in a size 10, which I'm not, that's also quite difficult to get someone to model it for me. So the vast majority of designs I've created for other publications I have not republished myself. Design work is incredibly low paid. If you think of the amount of hours that goes into developing the idea, writing the pattern, knitting it, and possibly any kind of pattern support afterwards, it's very low paid. I don't even want to think about the hourly rate, but it is guaranteed money. If I get a pattern commissioned by a magazine, I know that I will get paid for that at some point. Whereas if I self-publish a pattern, hundreds of people, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people might buy it. One person might buy it. Nobody might buy it. So I've still had the cost of developing the pattern, writing it, paying for the yarn, paying my tech editor, and I may or may not recoup any of that money. And the vast majority of designers don't make a lot of money from self-publishing unless you are Petite Knit, Stephen West, Andrea Mary, somebody like that, and you have hundreds of thousands of followers. You're probably not breaking even or making an awful lot of money. That's why a lot of designers also do other things like teaching, have a YouTube channel, do other things to monetize, have other income streams. When Game of Wool was on before Christmas, for some of the episodes, their designs that they created were picked up by yarn companies, and they created patterns and kits from those designs. Didn't happen in all episodes or everything they designed, but it happened to some of the things they designed. The yarn companies, as far as I can remember, who published patterns based on the Game of Wool designs were Wool and the Gang, Rowan and Serda. And from what I've been told, they are all owned by the same private equity company. Yarn companies are not necessarily owned by people who care about yarn crafts. They tend to be more and more owned by private equity companies, unless you're looking at like a smaller yarn company or indie dyes and things like that, smaller independent yarn companies. But the big ones tend to be owned by, a lot of them are owned by private equity firms these days. Same thing goes for some of the big online websites that you may be shopping from. I'm not hugely familiar with this kind of situations. I'm not going to name any names in case I get myself into trouble. So when they first started publishing some of the patterns from the Game of Wool, there was immediately questions on their Instagram saying, are the designers being compensated for this? So basically, are the designers being paid? From what I understand, the designers were not paid to be on Game of Wool. I don't know whether they had expenses reimbursed. I'm assuming they did. I don't know what the situation was when it came to like loss of time off for work and things, because they filmed over a number of weeks. From what I've been told, and I don't know if this is true or not, I think they filmed for like 3 days each week. If you work 5 days a week, you still have to take time off work. So I don't know how that works, whether they were compensated for that or not, but I've been told they weren't paid, but I don't know that. But there was loads of comments on these young companies' socials when they started publishing patterns from a Game of Wool about whether designers were being paid, and the standard reply was always that their contract was with Channel 4. So we all took that to mean that no, the designers are not being paid. That changed towards the end of the series. There was, I can't remember which week it was now, but I do remember on the pattern pages for whichever yarn company it was, it did say that the rights would revert to the designers, I think when the program stopped airing or after a certain period, I can't remember now. So I'm still not sure they were paid for it, or whether just the rights would revert to them and they could then publish the pattern, which then obviously means that you can get paid. Now, being on a show like Game of Wool should increase your exposure. Some of the ones that I looked up when the program started, a couple of people I already followed. Veteran knitter Simon, I already followed. Holger, I don't think I followed, but I'd seen his Instagram before. I think he already had quite a big following. Lydia, Becky Yarns, I think I already followed her. I wish I kind of done a screenshot of all their Instagram profiles when they started and compared it. I had a look the other day and I noticed that Lydia, Becky Yarns have quite a big following now. Veteran knitter Simon and Holger, I think his Instagram is General Hog Buffer or something like that. They have huge following in terms of knitting, but I think they had quite a big following before this started. Also Elsa, I can't remember what her Instagram is. She's got quite a big following. I don't know, I can't remember what her following looked like before she started. So obviously being on a show like that, especially if you stay all the way through, it may increase your following quite a lot, which then can lead to other paid work. So I know that Lydia is, for example, teaching at the Knitting Hotel later this year. Now, would she have been asked to do that if she hadn't been a Game of Wool? I don't know. I didn't ask Belinda, but I'm assuming Belinda, I don't know whether Belinda already knew her from before, but I'm assuming Belinda asked her because she had been on Game of Wool. So obviously being on a show like that does increase your opportunities. So even if they weren't paid for that, the exposure they got can lead to increased sales opportunities, paid opportunities later on. So that's a good example of working for exposure may be a good thing in the long run because it increases your following. But also, not everyone can do that. So I remember one yarn shop owner who was, I think, asked to be on the show, said that she couldn't because it would mean closing down her shop and also leaving her family. And I believe she's possibly a single parent. So obviously that makes it a lot more difficult. And some people wouldn't be able to afford to close down their shop for that long. Like if I'd gone on it and I had already had workshops booked in, which I have workshops now booked in till the end of July, it would be difficult to then cancel those workshops because I feel bad cancelling them, especially if I went out in like week 1 or 2. So yeah, it can, if you are in a situation where you can take advantage of something like that and you go all the way through, that can be great exposure, and it can really increase your chance of getting paid work afterwards. There are some quite big young companies that reach out to people on social media, people who quite large accounts or designers, and offer them yarn support. Now that could be yarn support so I could be offered yarn support where I create the pattern and the yarn company just gives me the yarn for free. And then I create the pattern and I sell the pattern. They could also offer you yarn support or reach out to you and say, if we send you this yarn, can you promote it? Can you create a product and then promote it? And we want to see X, Y, Z. So they may say, we want you to design this kind of project. We want you to promote it on your Instagram X many times. We want you to create 2 static posts and a reel. We want you to create on your YouTube channel, whatever it is. They may give you certain rules and certain timeline in terms of the amount of time. That is quite often not paid. Quite often that is just exposure. And sometimes the demands are quite big, that you have to create quite a lot of work and spend quite a lot of time on something. And all you get is a free product, which you may or may not like. I agreed last year. Somebody reached out to me and asked if I wanted this subscription box. It's called Knit in a Box. Box is still sitting on my shelf over there. I looked them up on the website and I thought, because I design patterns, it's not necessarily something I would knit, but they say, can we send you a box? And if you like it, you can talk about it on your socials and on your YouTube. There wasn't any requirement for me to talk about it or create certain content around it. So I said, yes, I'm happy for you to send me a box. And if I like it, I will talk about it, but I can't promise I will knit it because I design new patterns. I don't generally knit other people's patterns. And I thought, if it's not a color or a yarn or a pattern I like, then I'm not going to knit it. So they sent me the box. I talked about it. I can't even remember what the color was now, but it comes with the yarn pattern and I haven't knitted it. I've actually decided, because a friend of mine, her daughter-in-law is a very keen knitter, so I'm actually going to message her and ask if she would like it, because it's been sitting here for a long time now and I'm not going to knit it. If not, I might use it for a giveaway or something. But if somebody reached out to me and say, we will send you this yarn, can you promote it? And this is what we need. If they say, we'll send you this yarn, knitting tool, knitting gadget, whatever it is. And if you like it, you can talk about it. If you don't like it, that's fine. But if they send me and say, we want X amount of reels, static posts, whatever, then it would be a little bit more difficult for me to say yes to, depending on how big a job it was. So for me, it's a case of, if it's a company that's going to create quite a lot of exposure, and I think that would help the rest of the stuff I'm doing or get me more followers, then possibly yes. If I was asked to be interviewed or appear on a certain YouTube channel that had a huge viewing numbers, huge number of subscribers, then I would say yes, because it could drive traffic to my own channel. If it was something that was very labor intensive that wouldn't necessarily benefit me in terms of future sales, then I might say no, because of the time it takes. Everything related to knitting takes a long time and there are only so many hours in the day, so I have to prioritize work that actually gets paid. I've also seen various online publishers ask for work in exchange for exposure. Can you create a pattern for us and we will publish you on our website, but we're not paying you. Depending on who it is and what their following is and how that aligns with what I am aiming to create, maybe say yes, maybe not. But on the whole, unless I think it's going to lead to significant amounts of work, I would normally say no. I don't know. I've taught at several shows and I'm teaching at several shows this year. I don't know, when you do a talk at a show, I've seen people who are booked to do talks at Unravel. I'm assuming they're being paid. I don't know. Sometimes shows and festivals and stuff have talks that are free for people to attend. So I don't know whether the people who are doing those talks are paid or not, because I haven't done a talk at a show. I have done talks at events. I've done some talks for WI groups and a spinning, the Guild of Spinners, Weavers and Dyers, a couple of local groups. I've done some talks about that kind of stuff. And I did a talk at a yarn shop in Exeter when my second book came out, I think, the owner asked if I wanted to come and do like a sort of book launch event, which I did. I didn't get paid for that, but I sold a lot of books because of that. So there are certain things I would do, but other things I wouldn't. I would possibly agree to do a talk at a show if it was a show where I was either exhibiting or teaching. So I was going to be there anyway, and I could fit that in, and it might benefit me in another way. When I used to do Woolfest up in Cumbria, they used to have demonstrations, and I would sometimes volunteer to do a demonstration. Sometimes they would then let you have a double stall for the price of a single. So that was part of my motivation was saying yes, because it gave me a double stall. I only paid for a single, but it meant that when I did those demonstrations, my stall would fill up with people who wanted to listen to my demonstration, and they may or may not buy anything. Quite a few of them would hang around and buy, but it also meant that when I was doing that demonstration, people who were just coming in to buy, there was less space for them. And then they started doing it so that the stall we were demonstrating on was actually next to your own stall. So that kind of was less beneficial, although I would say, right, I'm on the stall next door here. If you want to pop around and have a look at my yarn, please do. But I still did it a few times because I thought, one time I think I talked about how to knit faster, and I used that as a way of plugging my Continental knitting course, for example, my online course. So if I'm asked to do something and I can find a way that I was going to be there anyway, or it has some kind of other beneficial thing for me. I taught at one show where the organizers said, instead of paying you for the workshop, we'll give you a free stall for the 3 days. And I thought that is really good, because I'm paying more for that stall. The size stall I had, I'd pay more for that than I would normally get paid to teach half a day workshops. So that was a really good deal for me. And I think they stopped doing that because they probably realized that what we were paying for a stall was more than what they'd pay us to teach a workshop. But that was a very good deal. I'm very happy with that deal. So obviously it depends if you decide to agree to do work in terms of exposure, whether you design knitting patterns or do anything else. But it is quite common for creative people especially to be asked to work for exposure. And sometimes that's okay and sometimes it's not. The main thing is that if people can't make a living from what they do, they can't do it. Or some people might be able to do it, but not everyone. So some people would then end up having to find something else to do, which means that they wouldn't be doing the creative job that they want to do. They'd have to do something else. And then we would lose that. So if loads of designers weren't paid anything for their work, they would then have to find jobs doing something else, which means we'd have fewer designers. Like I couldn't do this and keep down another job because of my health conditions and stuff. If I had to give up doing this and get a normal job, then I would probably still design for myself, but I wouldn't publish anything, and I probably wouldn't teach workshops because I wouldn't have time, and I would be in too much pain to do it because I have chronic pain issues. So we would definitely lose that. So when you see things, or if you're in a position where you're asking people to work for exposure, think about how this would benefit them, and try and make sure the benefits for the person who's being asked to do the work, not just for the person who's organizing it. If you see places, especially places where they offer like free patterns and stuff, one, ask yourself, do they have permission to offer those free patterns? Because there's an awful lot of websites that are offering free patterns that do not have permission to do so. And you should not be downloading those patterns if they don't have permission to do so. So do ask them that. Secondly, ask them how the designers are paid, or are they paid? Because if thousands of people are downloading patterns for free, the designers should be getting more than just exposure for it. I was quite pleased to see the number of people on the Game of Wool yarn companies that were involved on their socials asking, are designers being paid for this? And I did leave comments as well. I thought that was really good because it does mean that people understand. A lot of people who did ask were yarn shop owners and designers, and people are aware of that work for exposure anyway. But the more this word is spread, the more likely companies are to pay people what they deserve to be paid. So let me know what your thoughts are. Have you ever done work for exposure only in your industry? So let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.